right, hello and welcome everyone who is joining us live and those watching the recording. Today's webinar is Connecting Research Through Storytelling with our speaker, Zandria Kitsotso. My name is Elizabeth Johnson, the Native Initiatives Coordinator at SACNIS and an enrolled member of the Navajo Nation. Currently, I reside in the ancestral homelands of the Accomayaw and Peepash peoples. SACNIS is a fully inclusive organization dedicated to achieving true diversity in STEM. As the nation's largest multicultural and multidisciplinary STEM diversity organization, SACNIS creates space where all members, volunteers, and partners feel they belong and can embrace their intersectional identities. SACNIS is based out of California, which is the original homelands of over 200 tribal nations, bands, and entidades of Native American Indigenous people. We would like to take this time to acknowledge the original inhabitants of the various regions which we all live and work, and to honor the rich culture of the Indigenous people across the country. SACNIS Native Initiatives was awarded a one-year grant from General Motors to support the work the organization is doing to engage and establish relationships with TCUs, tribal colleges and universities, TCU STEM programs, faculty, and students. And today's event was developed with the TCU STEM student in mind, and we hope to continue to provide these opportunities to TCUs over the year. Now, I would like to introduce our guest speaker, Zandria Kitsotso. They received their bachelor's in physics from Texas State University and act as a research associate in the Texas State Physics Education Research Group. Today's webinar aims for participants to work towards understanding research presentations through the lens of storytelling and knowledge sharing. I will now pass the virtual floor to our speaker.
Hi, everybody. Thank y'all so much for coming. I'm super excited to be here and to talk to y'all. Just like Elizabeth said, if you want to introduce yourself inside of the chat, please feel free. Let me know what you're studying, about where you are, or whatever you would really like to share. And I'm going to put up my slides. There we go. Perfect. And let's see, let's share. So, like Elizabeth said, my name is Zandria Kitsotso. I am a research associate at Texas State University, which is in San Marcos, Texas. So we're in Central Texas. It is a large Hispanic serving institution. It's a public school, and I got my undergrad here in physics and have been here ever since. That was in 2020. And I'm going to talk about this more in a second, but I do a lot of qualitative work with multiply marginalized physics students. So my base is inside of physics, but my big broad field is physics education research. And there's animations. I forgot that I put animations in here. A quick outline of where we're going to be going and what we're going to be doing inside of this workshop. We're going to start with a prologue. I'm going to start with my acknowledgements. We're going to do a little bit of intention setting, and we'll do a slightly longer version of an introduction. The second big piece is whatever we decide to do next. A couple of options of ways we can go. So we're going to do a little choose your own adventure, a little pick a path is what I was calling it. And really to kind of center what y'all are interested in learning some of this moment, where we should spend most of our time. So there are three little pieces of our how-tos. We can go on how to write an abstract. We'll look through a couple of abstracts that I have written and the ones that I really admire, and go through that process and my process of how I do that, how I go through my process of building a talk. And I have an example talk that we can also break apart into pieces and see where everything meshes and everything and how we put that all together. But we're gonna get that after we start our prologue. And so why is it a prologue? I mean, this isn't a novel, this isn't a book, but I always start my talks and my workshops and we really in gathering of people with trying to bring myself center or give people context to my background and where I'm coming from. And so I really got this idea from Margaret Kovach and Graham Smith, two Indigenous methodologists. And the book that I read it from was the first edition, but it's the second edition out now, and it's very, very good. Both of them are very, very good, of Indigenous methodologies, characteristics, conversations, and contexts. And Margaret wrote this book, and she opens it up with a prologue that really kind of like sets the scene and sets up the space of like why we're here, what are we doing here, and what do we want to get out of this. And so in the context of her Indigenous research, it serves as a space for introductions of the person, and it also serves as a bridge between Indigenous and non-Indigenous researchers. So we're able to kind of like not just introduce ourselves, but also invite people to come on this journey with us. And I really, really like this idea of setting up this space and like allowing people to like come in as themselves and like getting to know these people and like thinking of this as a community space, because woven throughout my work and the work of people that I know is like stories of who we are, how we got to where we are, what led us on this path. And a lot of times in science, we're asked to kind of put that off to the side and come into a science space where we're like, we are objective and we're scientists and we're gonna push everything back and we're just going to focus on the science. But for myself and for a lot of historically marginalized people, that's impossible. We have things that we are connected to that connect us to our work, just no matter what our paths and our academic paths are going to be. So this really, really resonated with me, this idea of a prologue, of it opening up this space. And directly from the book, Margaret says that this writing comes from my own need and longing to engage with my ancestry and to say to my academic world that my culture counts. It's written from my voice and my style, and it reflects who I am. The elders say that if it comes from the heart and is done in a good way, our work will count. My hope is that this work will count for Indigenous people in a way that is useful. That's all. So that really sat really nicely with me and my own research motivations. And so quick acknowledgements. I have like my fancy like school acknowledgement, but I also really, whenever I have the chance, want to acknowledge the people that have been inside of my life that have like helped me become the person that I am. So like I have my research advisor at graduation a couple of years ago. I was on the organizing team with the Physics Education Research Conference last summer, which was our first in-person conference since COVID. And so we had a great team of people, and our theme was queering physics education. And so we really made like this really, really fun, awesome community space. And like, it was so nice to like connect with folks and just like be excited about like doing research again and going to conferences again, because it was really, really difficult. And there's a big disconnect. I also have my family at my mom's wedding a couple of years ago. I think this is a picture that has all of us in it, which is really, really nice because we don't have a lot of us like with every single person. And like my family is majorly important to me. I'm gonna have to be like fielding at some point. I told my sisters that I have a workshop and they're going to call at some point and they're gonna be like, where are you? Aren't you on FaceTime? And I can remind them again. But like they're an integral part of not just who I am and how I came to be, but like how I go about the world right now and like what values I have. And then I have my best friend that I also call my life/comedy partner. And she is just my favorite person in the world. And I'm so lucky to know her. And we got to know each other inside the physics program and we got the program together. And so she's just very, very important to me. So we did 2-person trivia one night and it was very exciting. And then the broader acknowledgements, this is the Texas State Physics Education Research Group. We have all of our past students, we have current students, our postdocs, our faculty, a number of the grants that the entire education research group is working on, that doesn't only just pay students, but also funds travel and funds me and my work. And it is just, it's a really, really wonderful group that has been growing over the last couple of years, which has been absolutely fantastic. So we have some new students coming in, we're getting new postdocs, we have new grants, and it's just a really, really exciting place to be and to be working. And so doing a little bit of intention setting, I want to say, like, just make these things known, just so we like know what we're going to be getting into. A lot of times, the subjects that I talk about can be like a little scratchy scratchy is what I call it. It can be a little scratchy scratchy for some folks because it does deal with like intersectionality and critical race theory. And inside of physics, it's hard to tell how people are going to gauge it. But coming in and just like setting this up and making sure that people know what they're going to be getting into, like know the conversations that we're going to be having, kind of like helps like everyone like negotiate and reevaluate like where they are and how they are interacting here. So I want to say that this is the collective space. We are creating knowledge together, we are sharing knowledge, and we're developing knowledge all together. I'm only facilitating in the sense that I have slides, but really what we're doing is doing this as a group and doing this in a community. I want to encourage you to ask the questions that you need inside of the chat. Anything, I have it open so I can see it, and I will try to respond like in time with these questions. If you have anything that you like are curious about or want to know more about, or me to backtrack on, and others who have similar knowledge or are able to answer are also encouraged to help like answer that and add to this collective knowledge. And you are free to engage as much as you feel comfortable. If you just want to sit back and watch and like hang out, feel free. If you want to ask questions and take notes and do whatever else, you are also more than feel free. But you are directors inside of this community discussion today. So don't feel obligated to stay, to leave, or to speak. Just like observing and being here with us is equally as important as anything else. Ooh, and I'm gonna go back. I have 2 acknowledgement slides, okay. Also, I want you to be able to take what you need and give what you can. In creating knowledge, we really rely on the community as much as we rely on ourselves. So like whatever resonates with you, whatever sticks with you, you are more welcome to take and to hold. And if you can give anything back, you are also invited to do that as well. And this is like my default like intention setting slide, especially inside of these physics spaces where I ask people to center the most marginalized, recognizing that we are here to learn, but we're also here to make sure that we're not centering the imperialist, white supremacist, cis heteronormative capitalist patriarchy, which is a quote from Bell Hooks in Cultural Criticisms and Transformations. We are existing instead of like a space counter to traditional academic culture and traditional STEM culture. And usually inside of those spaces where I'm not with other folks who are like me, it is easy to focus on what they call the big picture and think about all of the students, when my work and discussions that I usually have are about like my specific like subset of people who are underrepresented inside of STEM. And so I have more pictures that I forgot about. Family again with all of our dogs for Christmas. I also play the cello. I have a cello in here. I have a lot of online nerd friends that are so encouraging, and so we're gonna skip over that, but that's me. And so if you are able to, I have set up a Google Jamboard. I'm going to swing it over to this screen, so we can all kind of like interact in that way. But I'm asking, what do you want to learn? What are you interested in? Like, what path do we want to go on? And what questions might you have coming into this? So talking about storytelling and abstracts and presentations, like what questions might come up about those things. And so I'm going to leave this QR code on here for a second. I can also grab the link and put that in the chat. The QR code is being funky. Once I have a few folks sitting in there, I will scoot it on over. Or also feel free to type it inside of the chat as well. I'll just read it out. Scoot this over. Let's make it full screen. And so if you haven't used Jamboard before, everyone who has the link should be able to edit. It says there's 2 slides, second slide, the second frame is empty. But there are a couple options over on the side. There are pens, erasers, just your normal mouse. You can add images, you can add texts. What I usually do is do a sticky note, because it is a text box and it also makes it like nice and colorful, which is I think is always really exciting. And so like one thing that I hope to learn during this workshop is what y'all want to know. And so save it and it just pops up on the screen, and the sticky note box will like stay open. But you can move it around, you can put it on either side. And again, if you put it inside of the chat, I'll just type it and throw it on the Jamboard as well. All right, so I see how to summarize my research. And Charles, I'll put this one into green. Let's see. The experiences. Let's see how the experiences when it comes to connecting research and storytelling. So I'm not sure if I'm missing a word, but I'm going to write research, story, and experiences. And again, like I said a little bit ago, if you have any questions that end up coming up, like as we're talking, please feel free to post those in the chat. If you're like, I'm not entirely sure what I want to ask. Oh, I like this one. This one is real nice. So I see Roberto says, how do we balance the objectivity of science, which I can spell today, with our own indigenous, which I can't spell today, perspectives? That is a wonderful question. This one's slightly bigger because there's a couple more words on there. I see from Johnny how to go about my research and conclusion. Okay. I think this is like a nice chunk that we have here. Yeah, this was mostly again just to like help me like gauge the room, see what we want to learn. And again, if you have any other ideas or things that you would like to share, or in the chat, and I want y'all to be able to like, I don't want to talk at you guys. I really love you guys to talk at me as well. So you can always just flag me and be like, hey, pay attention to me. I need you to do this. Perfect. So after that, there's another QR code over here. So I'm going to throw this up. This is a Slido, I believe. Yeah, a Slido. I'll also put this link inside of the chat. And this one is just like a vote of like, what are you most interested in? Like, where do you want to start with? Like, what places do you want to focus on? And yeah, so it's like, it's ranked, you can choose whichever one, and that's what we're saying. There's only 3 options. There's abstracts, there's example talk, and there's how to do a talk. And they all kind of mix and mash together. But I want to make sure that we're honoring y'all's time. Let me make sure it's on. And that y'all can actually vote, yes. Also, again, you can throw it in the chat if you'd like. It's all real cash. All right, so I got some. Let me see. Awesome. Okay, it seems pretty even across the board. So I guess we'll just go in order for the most part. Yeah, so the options were how to present a talk, how to build a presentation, an example talk, and how to write an abstract. And another vote for build a talk. Awesome. Perfect. Then let's do, oop, that's not right. That's not what I wanted at all. My computer being weird. That is okay. There we go. So my process, a little bit more about me, which I get into like in the kind of in the example talk, and like we'll go through that piece by piece. I didn't share my actual background inside of these introduction slides. I completely forgot to do that. You know my name, my pronouns are they, them, I identify as trans, masc, non-binary. And my background, I'm Indigenous Chamorro, which is the native group from the island of Guam. You are not late, so I'm glad you're here. Thanks, Paul. Yeah, the native group from the island of Guam, which is in the middle of the Marianas, and my mom is African American. So that's like my little background with that. Okay, but I'm like, what else? I have other words. I also am diagnosed with ADHD, which really like kind of colors my trajectory in a way, and like colors my process. And so it's like, it's very loosey-goosey is kind of what I say, and it's not very linear. And so let's see. So we have here, how to abstract. My process for abstracts and for talks are basically the same thing. So we can always go through the process and then move over to the talk and then take a couple looks at some abstracts and like go through those piece by piece as well. So it's really iterative and not in the way that I'm like, I have a first draft and a second draft and a third draft, like in like this nice clean line, because it's very, very non-linear, especially when I'm writing. It changes both ways. And so this is like not very specific information, which is a little bit difficult, but we're going to get into some specifics, so don't worry. But yeah, it really just depends on like what I'm writing, where I am, and also really depends on like how my ADHD is doing this week or how focused I'm able to be. And so that does have like a really massive impact on like my actual process and how long it takes me. It usually will take me a few days just to get like ideas on a piece of paper pre-writing. But the first thing to do whenever I'm trying to write an abstract or trying to figure out what I'm going to do for a talk is to find a good nugget, or just like a good chunk of information. So I do qualitative work. And so my nuggets are usually pieces of transcripts or pieces of videos where we are analyzing it step by step and like learning what students say and like what stories students tell about their experiences inside of physics. And so when we're doing that, I work with a small team. It's my advisor and another physics education researcher. And we go through our transcripts and we code them for like major themes. Like this is a major theme of like, oh, people are being recognized as a physicist here. And this is a theme of this is their experience inside of the classroom. So that's like the big picture of the research itself. So it can be kind of broad. There's a lot of information and there's a lot of little pieces to find. And so I try to find like a small, achievable, like crunchable piece that I just call my little, it's like a little nugget of information. And most talks that I have been a part of that are contributed inside of major conferences are usually about 8 to 10 minutes. And so I'm not thinking too much about the length of time that I'm talking at first. I want to find something that I can talk about for maybe 5 minutes in total. And then I can flesh things out. I can add things. But as long as I can talk about it for like a solid 5 minutes, I know that's like pretty good. And so when I asked to bring stories of family, of food, of your favorite television show, like this is kind of what I'm thinking of. This is how I approach and like this process. That's a double. And so starting from the beginning, like my very, very vague outline of what I try to remember that I'm doing is what background information do they need to know? When we're telling a story, when we are talking about our day or talking about, like for me, talking to my sisters about my latest D&D session, I don't have a lot of time to tell them about that because they will stop paying attention after maybe 2 minutes, so I gotta go fast. But you start the story off like what background information do they need to know? And so in doing like a holistic picture of your research, like in a sense, like the way that I did the acknowledgements in the beginning, not just acknowledging my research group, but acknowledging the people who have helped me and who have mentored me and who are important in my life, is a way to like push against that like perceived objectivity of science. It is like this intentional bringing in yourself into this space and having people listen and having people pay attention to that. And that's like the biggest, not the biggest, that is like a major piece of how I approach my research and how I approached presenting, is making sure that I'm like acknowledging like, yeah, like my mom and my friend and like my advisor, like these people are just as important to me inside of this space as I'm doing physics, as I'm studying physics and as I'm researching physics, as anything else. So like really like bringing, like offering that information, like is like, I'm not doing this, like I am not an objective researcher because that doesn't exist. I have life experiences and resources that come into play. And so that's part of my background. It's but the background of what you're studying, and the background of yourself and how you came into this space. One of my very, very good friends, Kate Daniels, another Indigenous physicist, starts off all of her talks talking about farming and talking about plants and how her research connects her to plants and growing things inside of a garden. And she does like astrophysics, black hole stuff. So it seems very, very not counterintuitive, but she is able to connect her background and her experiences in that way, with that metaphor. And so that's all part of the background. And next up is what happens in the beginning. What starts us off? What is right after we have all of our background, once we have like our summary, how are we starting getting to the races? And then what do we need to set up before reaching the climax of the story? So we have background, we have introductory sentence, we have our starting point, and what do we actually need to know? Like, who are the characters that play? What are the equipment that we are using and studying with? What are all of these things that like, will help us contextualize and understand the height of this story? And then once we get there, what is at this most pivotal moment, and what is it that we're going to remember, and what is it that we are centering? And so for me, it is the stories of our okay, I didn't have a Q&A open. No, I got it. All right. And I see there's a question. I need more specific explanation on how pivotal moment applies to the workflow. Perfect. So this is, for me, the pivotal moment, like the climax is that nugget that I was talking about. It's that 20-second clip. This is what happened. And everything else is leading up to what happened. And so in my context, it is, which we'll do like in like the little breakdown of the example talk. It is this student experienced this, and this is what it means. In my best friend's research, it is we made this semiconductor and it's doing this weird thing on the graph that we weren't expecting. And like, that's what we're centering. Like that is like where we're going. And so like it's kind of the starting point, and I build everything off of that. It's that like main nugget, and I like figure out like what people need to know before going into this spot, and what conclusions are we drawing after this spot. And I can make it, I hope that was a little clear, and we can go over more of it when we see like all the bits and bobbles. And in some contexts, what would a sequel be about? What are you doing after this? Are you continuing to study this phenomenon? Are you using a different framework or different methods to go through of it? Awesome. Of course, Paul. And so the last bit is always like the future work. What are we going to be doing next, if anything is going to be happening next? And so this is all lives in my head when I first start out, which is very difficult, but it all like accumulates in stews and lives there for a while until I'm able to actually articulate it. So it takes a while before the thoughts actually come into words. And when they do come into words, it is honestly just words. I have like I use a lot of whiteboards, and I use a lot of just like blank paper whenever I'm drafting or whenever I'm trying to figure out things out, just because I can like erase it and move it and like flip it around and like do different colors. It's very rarely like starting on the computer, at least for me, because that really helps me like organize things and figure out like what I'm saying. And it is just like a true, like very messy word dump. It's fragments of sentences, it's parts of ideas, it's questions. It's just like, I think these words mean this. I might come back to this later, who knows? And just like having all of that, just like almost like an explosion of words on a page. Sometimes I do it in voice notes, because sometimes I can able to say things a little bit easier than I'm able to type them or write them out. And any and all thoughts that I have usually end up either on the whiteboard or on the piece of paper that I'm working on. And it, because at least at that point, for me, at least, so the way that my brain kind of works is I can like look at pieces and I can find pieces and like almost do arts and crafts with them. I'm like, I don't actually cut them out, but like take this and move it over here and move this over here. So I'm not trying to generate brand new ideas when I'm actually drafting things. And for me, and what I tell my best friend working on their thesis, their master's thesis right now, which is so hard, so difficult, they're doing so well, is that I don't delete anything. Whatever thought I have, I know it's not perfect, it's not ideal, it's not like nice and pretty and final drafty. And coming to terms with like that ickiness of just like, these are bad, they're not bad words, but they're words that don't really make a lot of sense. And I don't really know what they mean. Like I try not to focus too much on like not having the right words, not being like at that final stage. And really just like preserving all of those thoughts, because those thoughts, if they don't end up inside of the abstract, the presentation, they might end up inside of another thing, or they might open up another conversation about the actual research. So I have like draft 1, draft 2, draft 3, draft 4. I make a brand new one every single time and like keep that timeline. And I have like a massive just document of everything that is unused. I deleted that sentence, I'm not using this, and it all just like lives inside of one place for the specific project, in case I want it later. And we're going to skip a few slides. And so this this is like in the how to abstract piece, but it really lives on like, that's how I start any kind of project, be it writing or being a presentation. And so when I start actually putting together a presentation, anything that ends up inside of my unused pile may end up inside of the talk. And so for like, let's see, Charles is asking, how does draft 1, 2, 3, and for like a backup of some draft of something, how does that work? So let me see. So I will, like, once I'm transferring words from on the page to typed words, I will write everything out, and then I will save that document as my first draft, like a very, very generalized first draft. And then I will copy that document and start a brand new document, which I'll call draft 2. So I'm working with the original, but I still have all those like original thoughts and ideas on this one. And then I'm editing on a second brand new document, all the words of the original one. And the same thing happens for 3 and for 4, where I finished my edits, I finished my second round of edits. I'm going to save this, copy it, reopen it as a new document, and start editing on a different one that's draft 3. And it's almost redundant to have like all these like an unused pile and like all of these multiple drafts. But it helps me to like organize my thoughts, and if ever I'm like, I can pull together something real quick, like my first draft is like not that bad. It helps me see like the progression of how the writing has changed, even inside of just like this small context. Did that answer your question, Charles? I can also. Awesome, perfect. Yay, awesome. I'm so glad. And most abstracts is, for me, at least that I've encountered, have been like about 150 to 200 words, which is not that many. And so like keeping all of these like unused files and all of these drafts, and like keeping like those like outside extra thoughts, really makes it easier to put together an actual presentation. Because if it didn't fit inside of the abstract, if it was like too specific, or it was like just we needed to cut maybe 10 words, that might be a point to talk about instead of our findings inside of the presentation. And so I will talk that I have pulled up is a little long, so I'm not gonna like go through, I'm not like gonna like present it, but we will go through it. But I will need to switch to PowerPoint where I have it saved. And while I'm pulling that out, this is, why is it doing that? Okay, this is the outline of the talk that I'm going to be going through. And so if we were looking at it like within that like original storytelling flow, we have Texas State in Context and the community-oriented LA program. And that is like the background information. That's what people need to know coming into this. Like it helps us set the stage. It is our props, it's our backgrounds. That is like the background of our story that like everything's playing out on. And a little bit further than that, like what are we setting up? Like what characters are coming into play? That is intersectionality and critical race theory and identity work. And so like that is like the theory behind it, but like that's who we're talking about. We're using these people to talk about and contextualize another story. And then the actual like pivotal moment, the climax of the story, the findings, which is Texas State program supports LA, the Texas State LA program supports identity through these specific pieces of the theory. Like these characters are also going to show up instead of our pivotal moment, and they're very, very important. This is the big outline. I'm going to switch over to my PowerPoint. And let me see. Perfect. So this, I gave this talk a while ago. It's not old, exactly. This is the present button. This QR code here, I think it's at the end of my slide deck for today, but it includes past presentations that I have done, contributed, and invited presentations. So like slides are in there. It always helped me whenever I'm doing a presentation to see somebody else's presentation and just like make notes on what they started with, where they're going, and like how their flow of their talk worked. And like just being able to like see that and have that available was always like, have those examples available was always really, really helpful to me, especially when I was first starting out. And so here is the outline. Not all of my talks begin with a long outline. The longer ones do. Because they're going to be a little bit, because they're usually about 45 minutes to an hour. My 8 to 10 minute talks, there's not a lot of, it seems like a lot of time, but it actually ends up not being as much time as you imagine it being. And so I maybe will have an outline for those ones, or I'll just like start getting into the actual context and like starting it with everything. And so we have our background. And do I have my background in this one? Oh my gosh, okay. Interesting. So we have this bit of background. I'm going to open up another background. So I had 2 of them open. Texas State as a whole, our learning assistant program, which is what my specific corner of research is studying right now. That talks about everything that we're doing here. We have photos of the LA program. Whenever putting together a presentation, I have a lot of things inside of my speaker notes as well, just like big bullet points, especially if I put a lot of photos on the page. Just to help orient me, figure out what I'm talking about, like what these pictures actually mean. So this is just like our LAs in classrooms. And I'm going to open, I had another one that I was going to show that actually had my background in it, which this one does not. I'm surprised. So we're also going to open up this one and look at the beginning of this one. Same QR code, same opening here. And so this is what I do with each, which I thought was in the other one. So that's totally my bad. Yeah, it's very confusing at first. It took me a long time to like figure this out and like actually like have like even to be able to like say and like write down a process and like explain that was honestly like the hardest part of it. Because like, especially when I was first starting out and I was like looking up things, I was like, how do you do a presentation? How do you put one together? It's like you start, like there's this very, very like linear list of steps that you're supposed to go through when you're starting out putting the presentations together. And I was like, that doesn't work for me. And like, I don't know where to start. And like starting and like making that initial choice is what takes the longest time sometimes. Yeah, just figuring things out and like not having those tools, especially like different tools that aren't just like a set, this is how people put them together and this is what you're supposed to be doing, was very, very impactful. And so a little bit similar to what I did opening up this session, whenever I give my talks, be they 8 minutes or 45 minutes, I explained intersectionality with them. And I use that explanation, for me at least, to kind of center my experiences and my background coming into this qualitative research space. So I have pictures of my family. I have all the little things pointing to the person in the middle are like things that make up my resource and make up my background. And I really try to be explicit about this, again, because science tells us that we need to be objective and to push away our backgrounds and focus on what's at hand, focus on the equipment that's at hand, which again is impossible. You are coming in with this vast set of knowledge that can only add and enrich the science space. It can only add and enrich whatever field that you're in. And to be, because I have been told to doing this quite, not super often, but quite often, by non-education researchers and non people inside of this like other sphere, that this is unnecessary, that this doesn't actually matter to how I approach my research. And it really does. Like, I cannot describe my experiences doing research or even being in university without also talking about how the research has helped me connect to my Indigenous identity, how talking to other Indigenous people has helped me like really connect to that part of my background that I didn't have a lot of specific information for. And like, it helped me to connect to other people who have similar experiences, being Indigenous or being brown in physics, and really creating those community spaces where we're just like, we're having these experiences and they are all very similar, but it's really cool that we're not the only one. Like, we might be the only one at our institution, but we're not the only one that's here. And like, without those community spaces and without that additional work, I would not have remained in the field. I definitely, there were times in the very beginning where I was like, this is very like white, and I am the only Black person inside of the room, and I don't know what to do, and I can't relate to these experiences that people are having. And it's just, it was really difficult, like, to feel like you're the only one. But once I found those other folks who were like me and all the other people who were like me, I was like, okay, they did it. That means I can do this. And if I have a question, or if I'm just like, I think this was a microaggression, and I'm typing like on Slack because we're all virtual. I'm like, I think this was a microaggression, but I'm not entirely sure, but I feel bad about it. Like, being able to have something to like validate that experience, because they bring their whole selves into the science space, was really important. Just make sure that I wasn't like going crazy and like my experiences were real. So yeah, I make it very explicit of my background, my family, and everything else that really helps me actually stay here. Let's see. Oh my gosh, I am an auntie now. My sister's having a baby. So I'm like not just a dog auntie, I'm like a human auntie soon. So I'm real excited. And so yeah, so that is that one. This is so that is the part of my background that I include in all of my talks. It's helpful for me because it also like is able to contextualize intersectionality to people. So it's kind of like twofold, where I'm just like, here's a definition of something and here's what it looks like in practice, in real life. And for me, in qualitative work, I am talking to mostly marginalized folks and asking them about their experiences inside of physics, which could be good, which could be bad, which could be a little like scratchy. And I'm asking them to do this and to be vulnerable with me, to share and to study. And so I always find it's only fair that I am also trying to be vulnerable and share with others. If I'm expecting them to do that with me, I should also be mirroring that and like honoring their experiences and their knowledge that they're sharing with me by doing the same with other people inside of the field. And so, let's see, more background, more context. This is part 2. This is the major characters that we are going to be saying. So I talk about my procedure. These are the steps that I took. This is what it looked like. This is who I talked to. So very like vague. It's dependent on if words on the screen are very helpful to you to like help you orient yourself, and like speaker notes can be confusing because I always get lost sometimes with speaker notes. Then I very much encourage having whatever you're going to say on the screen. The screen is helpful for not just people that are reading, but for you as well. It is a tool to help you share things. It is a tool to help you remember things and like know where you are and orient yourself. And so if your slides, if you feel better with less like small bullet points and just like 3-word bullet points, and you have 4 of them, that is your jam, that's what I would like, that's what I would absolutely do. That's how I would structure my slide. But if you like to have like some paragraphs or just like slightly longer sentences on your screen to help you share your knowledge, I also very much encourage that. There's no one way to actually do a presentation. It's all about what your style is and what feels comfortable for you. And so we go through these background characters. We go through the theoretical framework. For me, this is part of my theoretical framework, as is this. So I have background information. Where are we? We're setting the stage at Texas State. We're talking about this specific program and the set of students, and this is what this program looks like. We go into the procedure. These are the steps that I took. This is where I gathered my data. This is who I gathered it from. And this is like some of their background. We're talking about them more. And then I go into my theories. These are the theories that we're going to be talking about. This is how we're going to be contextualizing the actual work that was done and the stories that have been told. So yeah, we're going through it real fast. And then I get into part 3-ish is like the findings. It's this pivotal moment. Like, what are we talking about? And for me, so this nugget inside of this presentation was that the LA program created community. It helped develop what is it? Culturally relevant and equitable community space. So that it was my nugget. I was like, I'm talking about this. This is a pivotal moment. This is what I want people to remember, is that the LA program did this. And even in here, because I have individuals, I can give like a little bit of background on who the individual is, what they do when I talk to them, and what they said. And for the purposes of like today and for interviews, since I show interviews as my data, I like to ask people like kind of like prep them and ask them like, what did you notice? And we're gonna be talking about this afterwards. Like, watch out for this key point, watch out for this key point while we're going through this video. So they know like where to direct their attention. That's always very helpful for me when people do that, because it just like, it helps point to a certain direction. And so we're not gonna be watching the videos. It will be very fun. I believe some of them are like in the Google Drive or somewhere else, maybe on YouTube. And then I have the setup for the findings. We watch the data, we look at the data, which is the interview video. And then we have the summary of what we saw. So we were paying attention to these certain things. Okay, we watched it. Did we see them? And what do they actually mean? So like going on to like, what is it saying? What is this person's narrative saying? And again, like this interpretation and my interest is colored by honestly, my own selfish want to have friends instead of the department. When I started this research, I was in a pedagogy class. So I was one of the learning assistants. And we have a pedagogy class, and we were learning about like equity in physics and like gender dynamics and stereotype threat and microaggressions. And all the papers that we were reading had to do with like mostly like white women or Black men, which is a valuable resource to have. But I went to my advisor and I was like asking her like, okay, like what about the papers on women of color? Because that's where I was at the time, back when I was a woman. I was like, where are the questions about like people of like women of color? Like, what about this specific subset? Because like I can relate to pieces of both of these people's experiences, but like, what about mine? Mine is very, very different. And I was like, and what about queer people in physics? What about Indigenous people in physics? Like, where does that exist? And why doesn't it exist? And so like, even starting over and doing this work was because of my desire to give back to my community and make the voices of my community heard. I see Jamie is asking about recording. It's going to be on YouTube, which is going to be very exciting. So I really appreciate that. And so that is basically the big picture. I can go back to the flow so we can kind of look at it again before we look at the abstracts. I'm trying to think if there's anything else in this PowerPoint. Let's see, there is like future work for the most part, and then my closing. So I'm gonna go back to the other slide deck. Lots of different slide decks today. And so I wanted to make a map. I should have made a map about like, if I'll have my email at the end of the presentation. If you want to send me an email, I'm more than happy to send you these slides. I'm definitely going to edit them just a little bit to make it a little bit more clear and like point out like where in this outline goes with like the flow and like how I set up my ideas and how I'm like drafting those ideas. I can definitely like connect those two pieces. But I have like background information, key players, and then findings is like the big 3 bits. And so to look at, we only have 9 minutes left. An hour goes by so fast, less faster than I think. I'm going to go backwards a little bit, and we're going to look at a quick abstract. And like the abstracts will also have like indicators of like this is this piece, this is this piece, this is this piece. And so this is one of my abstracts for a paper that I wrote in 2019. Yes, I believe this is a 2019 paper. And what I'm going to do with the slide deck, again, please feel free to email me. I'm going to throw my email in the chat right now in case you don't catch it at the end if you wanted to copy and paste it. Yeah, feel free. I'm more than happy to talk to y'all more if you have any more specific questions, if you want to go over it a little bit slower, if you want slides. Yeah, just let me know how if I'm able to help you and what I can do to do that. But for the abstract, which is a condensed small version, 150 words, again, not very many words, to explain a whole entire research study, it follows the same flow, just shorter is how I like to think about it. And so I've heard people describe writing an abstract as like putting together, oh, those are my headphones, like putting together like an elevator pitch, where it's like what business people say, like you have from the first floor to the 10th floor to like pitch your idea to the big businessman up top. That's never been helpful for me. I don't like elevators, so I'll usually take the stairs. So I like to think about it again as like a 30 to 60 second, like really quick story that captures all the big pieces, like all the big parts of the story. And I pretend that I'm talking to my sisters who are going to tune out after a minute or two because they don't understand Dungeons and Dragons, and they will start just like nodding and saying, yeah, okay, that sounds cool, but not even know what I'm talking about. So like I always think about it as I'm telling somebody something. I'm telling them a short story, trying to capture their attention and just like have it like be contextualized inside of this small space. And so whenever I was starting to write out abstracts, I would actually like, I do a lot of voice memos. If I'm not writing things down, I'll do a voice memo and I will like practice describing like a scene of a movie or like a scene inside of a book and just like go from this is where it started, this is what happened, like these are the characters that were there, this is what happened, and this is how it ended, just to kind of like get that mindset of what an abstract is almost down, and really just like contextualize it, which sounds a little wild, but it really helped me figure things out because I love telling stories. I love consuming media, Dungeons and Dragons, and like animated movies and things like that. And so like I took things that were very familiar to me, and practiced saying them out loud and like writing them down out loud and like following that flow and see how that looked. And I always design my abstracts and my presentations on like that storytelling aspect. And so in this slide deck, when I edit it, I'll also have like a slide by slide version of just like where this matches with the flow. So let me see, we still have some time. So step by step, what we have here is historically research on underrepresented students in physics is conducted primarily at predominantly white institutions and has focused on 2 separate identities, gender or race. That is my background information. That is telling us that we are going to be looking at something besides a predominantly white institution. And we're going to be looking at something that's not just gender or race. And for the purposes of my research, I put underrepresented inside of quotation marks because while it is true, it is less a question of underrepresentation of marginalized people in STEM and more about like the historic and traditional structures that oppress and marginalize people coming into the field, where it makes it more difficult to be your holistic self, where you, like I would go home on the weekends to spend time with my family, or I would go home on the weekends to work, so I could pay to be in my classes. And that would take away from time that I got to study or got to do other things or meet up with other people who were inside of my classes. Which my department luckily was very we have a lot of students who are also inside a similar position, and so we all kind of work together on that, luckily. But even if I was just like, I'm gonna go spend time with my mom and I'm off this weekend and I don't want to do physics, I want to sit with my mom and watch Hallmark movies because it's Christmas in July or whatever, so if I'm taking this like a summer class, like that's like sitting and watching Christmas in July on Hallmark. It was just as important as actually doing my physics work. And it really made me feel like a human being when I would go back to the classroom on Monday, because I had some time to myself where I was able to do that. So again, luckily my department was very accepting of that, and they would really work with students, and they were very lenient. But that is like part of that aspect that actually changes physics, and having that instead of a very traditional academic space be like looked down upon or seen as like weird or bad is the reason why people are marginalized inside of these fields. And so I don't like to say just underrepresented. I usually say marginalized or systemically marginalized or systemically minoritized. Really, like bring in that point. It's not the fault of the individual, it's a fault of the system, and it's a fault of the traditions of Western academia. And so going on in the last couple of minutes, because of this, the unique intersections experienced by women of color has been largely ignored. In addition, the research on experiences of LGBTQ plus physicists in a collegiate setting is virtually non-existent, at least inside of physics. And so it's more like, okay, we're talking about intersectionality between gender and race. We're also talking about women of color and queer students. This paper will present common themes in the idea of who does physics through the lens of women of color and female LGBTQ plus physicists who are currently or recently enrolled in a physics program at a large Hispanic institution. Like catching back to, we were at predominantly white question. Let's see, I want to ask if this also be represented in a numerical pattern, apart from this essay pattern like I'm seeing on the screen here. Well, think about that, Jamie, because I think so. I don't think I have time to answer that right now, but I think I might have an answer for that. This is just the abstract that you would submit before, like the first step to doing the presentation is submitting an abstract and having that be accepted. It's like this holistic picture before you put like all down in parts, but there are definitely like are numerical ways to represent this information that is available. I think I have it. And so going down, so please email me. I will be more than happy to share that and talk about that with you. So we have our background, we have our context, we have where we are, what we're doing, who we're talking to, what people are, what characters are going to be on the screen. And then we have the results, or not the results, the pivotal moment, the climax of the story, what we're actually talking about, what was our nugget of information that we wanted to talk about inside of the presentation. And it's contextualized by the procedure. This is what we did. We did semi-structured interviews and asked about their perceptions of physics environments, support systems, and how they described a physicist. And the conclusion bit, we employ these theories and tying it back to what we said before, and examine narratives through this lens and this framework to understand the experiences of our participants. And so, and I'll have it, I can definitely have it broken down a little bit more so it matches the flow that I had earlier. This is what an abstract about the very quick presentation that I just showed you a little bit ago would kind of look like. And I believe it is 5 o'clock my time on the dot. So I believe I am all out of time. So I'm going to stop sharing. And I'm going to be quiet for a minute. Thank you guys so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Zandria. That was a great presentation. I wish I saw your presentation before I had to present my research. Just a quick announcement, everybody that's a participant, I am putting an announcement in the chat, so please take a quick glance at that. Thank you so much, Zandria. Thank you to our sponsors, General Motors, and of course to our participants and viewers. SACNAS actually right now is looking to partner with a TCU to host an in-person TCU mini conference. These mini conferences would include a community meal and a networking session, a TCU STEM faculty workshop with lunch included, and a TCU STEM student workshop with lunch included as well. To get more information, you can contact me, Elizabeth Johnson, the Native Initiatives Coordinator at Elizabeth, ELISAVETH @sacnas.org. If you enjoyed today's webinar and you can, if you enjoyed today's webinar, you can find more upcoming and previous webinar recordings on our website at sacnis.org/webinars. This concludes our webinar with Zandria. Thank you so much for taking your time to join us, and we'll see you next time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.